Here for another edition of the program called What's Going On Flint's number one studio program. Let's see, did I say Flint? Okay, Genesee County. We got to enlarge our
Genesee County, Michigan.
we got to keep enlarging our space.
Because there is this is named. I don't know if you know that, but it was named after a county in upstate New York, Genesee County.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, see, my family came in from Genesee County, New York,
Uh,
and when they came here in the 1850s, and there was already established back in the 1700s. There was established Genesee County, New York,
okay.
and it's actually they have a place. They have a brewery there, by the way.
Now, don't tell me your family actually started the name of the county.
Oh no, there's so many.
I know what you're saying.
There's so many people, and like Flushing, Michigan, then Flushing, New York. You ever notice the similarities?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, so that's what it was. A lot of the people came here from New York originally. Yeah.
Well, people do name, they when they come from, and there's some pride in it. They want to rename it and something that they're already proud of, and try to recreate that where they are. I can understand that, but I can't understand people that's trying to run from places where they did not like it where they were. Then they get here and then they start waving the flag of that place that they ran from, and then burn the flag of where they came to. That I don't understand. But I'm seeing too much of it, and I feel like Jack Benny here. Cut that out. We got to cut some of this stuff out. Okay, I wanted to. By the way, John, did you see the this report where one of the jets took off without a pilot? Did you read that report where a jet took off?
Oh, I didn't see. No, this shocks me. Yeah.
Yeah, pilot. There was no pilot in the jet, and it just took off. Some kind of AI thing, and it took off and was flying itself, and there was no pilot in the plane.
There's a guy that you used to see on Facebook. He's no longer there. He's a local guy. He actually was a commercial pilot for years. And actually, people are telling them that their sons or their daughters want to become professional pilots. And he was saying, and he was already now no longer a pilot. He was saying, actually, they're going to be doing a totally computerized. I mean, AI is going to be doing this in the next 20 years. This is like 7-8 years ago. I saw him post that. And I was surprised. I thought that was something you really had intensely human thing behind it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, it's a possibility that they actually might evolve, because you don't have the traffic situation going on as you do on the terrestrial traffic. So it might be very possible to actually have pilots.
Wow, that is so frightening. Having a jet take off and going down the runway without a pilot, and then it's flying in the air. I don't know I've seen runaway trains. I mean, I've seen some Hollywood, productions that have that. Denzel Washington was in one of those films. For example, the plane, the train had left the station, was running itself, and they had to then find a way to have the train on another rail catch up, and then they had to jump from the train to the other. Hollywood. The stuff that you think about, well, that can't happen. And Hollywood was these fictional things. Now the stuff is happening in real time, and it's frightening because even away from that kind of thing happening in real time, we have these bozos that are running this country that I don't think. I'm wondering if anybody that's running this country is in these positions of power know what they're doing. And I'm really beginning to have some questions about whether the people running the country in Washington know what they're doing, and that includes these members of the Supreme Court, which I'm really beginning to worry about them. All 9 of them, they can call themselves whatever the ideological outlook is. I'm not satisfied that any of them, conservatives, liberals alike, I'm not so sure any of them know what they're doing. They certainly don't know anything about this Constitution they claim to be following and interpreting and so on. And it does not matter which one of them is doing the interpretation. I don't agree. I don't think any of them have a handle on it. And this thing that I came and talked about at the studio today, we'll be talking about birthright citizenship. I cannot believe, I can't believe what I'm hearing about that. And the Supreme Court has been skirting around making a decision about it, because I don't think they want to make a ruling on this, because if they make a ruling based on what is being said, they can't sustain that based upon the Constitution, because there is no. I have to say this for the whole court. These people are over the. They make a decision that you have to follow uh, uh, throughout the country. This is not what they did last week, where they were talking about what they ruled on are these judges in these lower courts making a ruling. They're claiming these rulings can put an injunction against the action of a president all over the country, and so it's not local to that particular case before the court. These courts are now enjoining the president that he cannot act beyond the courtroom of that case, and stifling his action as the commander in chief, what is a national responsibility assigned by the Constitution. They're saying he can't do that, and that's what they did. That's what they're ruling on right now. They're not touching this issue of birthright citizenship, and I think they're scared to touch it because they out there and the baggage they're carrying is they're trying to say there is such a thing as birthright citizenship for these immigrants, and I can't believe they're trying to act as if the 14th Amendment had anything to do with immigrants. I mean, you got to be kidding.
See, if I were a black person, I think I would have seen trying to broaden that is actually trying to destroy the uniqueness of our past and also what the struggle was.
John,
That's what I would see it as.
yeah, that's the way it should be seen, and it's not seen that way because people don't realize how far off they are in putting it in the realm of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, which were civil rights amendments as a result of the. Let's be honest here. These are all civil rights amendments added to the Constitution as a result of what had happened at Fort Sumter and beyond, and the 4-year war was fought, the so-called Civil War. That's wrong too. We're calling it a Civil War, where in a Civil War is where two different entities of government or power, or let's say that it's two different instruments that are competing for power, and they're fighting an internal battle for power in the national uh, landscape, and each of them is competing for which one is going to actually be the one to go in there and control the corridor of power within the landscape of the country. And that is not what was going on in 1861, and that's not what the secession of the country that we faced. A second secession. Secession. We've had two uh, attempts. I mean, major attempts at secession. The first was one we had, the secession from England, and we celebrate that one because that's what the country was. That's the nation's birth out of that one. But this other secession was the one that the Kennedy brothers, the Donald and Ronald Kennedy, are writing about. These two brothers in North Carolina. They wrote a book that needs to be read by a lot more people than have read it, to become familiar about what really was going on during the so-called Civil War, because this was a real movement that continued the secession movement of 1776. And you cannot really understand the secession of 1861, which was the secession of the 11 states. First of all, I should say 7 states before Lincoln was inaugurated in 1861. Before that inauguration occurred, 7 states had already succeeded from the South, and then when Lincoln tried to back up um, the the idea that they had no right to the secession, And when he tried to, in fact, force them by bayonet back into the Union and had no constitutional authority to do that, then 4 other states went out because they saw this as tyranny on the part of Abraham Lincoln. And that's a fact that's not found in any history book they're going to allow to be taught in any school or university in this country. It is not taught anywhere, but you can read about it in the books written by the Kennedy brothers, these 2 brothers in North Carolina that wrote a book called, and it's a very good book to read, called "The South Was Right." And that book is not ready to be taught. It should be, but the country is so off kilter that it would be so shocking to the consciousness of the country to read that we have 700,000 people that laid many of them, 600,000 of them plus are laying on these battlefields, and then some others that were that died as a result of things that wars bring, which is disease and starvation, things like that will cause additional death. But on the battlefield itself, we have 620,000 or so people that were laying out there on the battlefield. Most of them from the Northern Army, 300 some thousand of them, and then another 200 some thousand of the Army in the from the Confederate Army. And when you add the two together, something like 620,000 persons dying on the battlefield of the most deadly war this country has fought, where the country was fighting against itself. And we need to tell that story so we can understand how that played out and what that was about. And we don't have anybody teaching that. And it was stunning to learn the real facts of what really occurred from 1861 to 1865, when there was another war of secession in the country. Now this one called, not the first one called this, but the second one called a civil war. But there was no civil war that was fought when they were fighting. We were part of the British Empire, and that war is not considered to be a civil war at that point. It's called a war of American independence. When the South did it, then that's war. That war is a civil war, and we need to go. We need to really go and do our homework, and we have not done our homework because we don't understand what the Kennedy brothers are talking about, and we don't understand this book either. That's put out there as a secondary source of the same ideas they had in that book, and that is a book called "Jefferson Davis Was Right." They're not ready for these books to be. I did a paper at the university, and in the bibliography that I passed in to document what the paper dealt with, when it was finally published by the university, inside the university, I noticed they had taken out of the bibliography certain books. The book, the 2-volume work, volume 1 and volume 2 of the books on the Confederacy, those were taken out, and some other books that I put down as a grounding point of what I had said in my document, and what was a documentary type of writing that I had done. I I know they're not going to publish the book that I know they're not going to publish this book. I can't even get the university that's supposed to be involved in universal understandings of things, where you get both sides of an issue and you're supposed to cover it objectively from both sides.
Actually, there's a book thing online that I just saw that it's like it sells books from sources. I mean, the old ones like from the left to the right and everything else. And next time I see it up, the advertisement, I'll send it to you. But they might be even willing to take on new work too, and new authors.
From a university?
It's a higher level. It's actually what they do is like they find the stuff like the like the leftists would write back years ago. Also the right wing, like the anarchists and all this other stuff. But they're also might be open to doing. I can't remember the name of the company, but it was just I was looking at. I think it was called Based Books or something like this. And basically, they're allowing people. They're just an advocate for First Amendment.
Mhm.
And so you might find a well. Now there's also you want if you actually might attack too. You might want to consider is looking at TAM Publishers because they published one on a book. Just I got it at home about Karl Marx.
Tan publishers.
TAM Publishers, which is a traditionally Catholic publication, publisher. And but you might want to look. I'm just inserting that because the TAN's got a huge distribution already set up. Okay,
Mhm.
I know I bought several books from there, but this book I bought, I've been reading on and off about Karl Marx was published by them, and it's actually got more wider. Their interviews of the author of that's actually got wider audience than they typically do for a Catholic publisher. Because TAM Publishers actually would reprint the old catechisms from the Baltimore catechisms and stuff like the different series, and so that might be an option because this person was Catholic, I think, but they might be open. So you got two possibilities for publishers.
Yeah, that would be interesting to see because I'm facing I see a lot of censorship, and even on Facebook you see it. I mean, more. I see it more. You'd be surprised how much censorship is on Facebook, where they simply the other day that happened where they just simply took everything off the screen, and I fortunately I have a way of getting around it when they do that, but just things just go poof, and before you know it, your screen has been removed. But I don't just use that one site, and I have a backup that I use, and when they do that, I can go back and import it from another place and put it back in there. But there's a lot of censorship that goes on in this country, and it's amazing how much of the shadow, what they call shadow some kind of word they use,
Shadow banning or yeah.
shadow banning, where they you don't know that your outreach has been limited, and so those that have asked for friendship, they don't really have any way of looking at what you're writing or what you're publishing because they've been shadow you've been shadow banned with those persons, particularly if they have a certain amount of people that's watching what they do. They don't want this network to be building and budgeting where they lose control of what people will know and what people are talking about. It's amazing that we would claim to be the freest country in the world, and you have this kind of censorship where they are watching these. We're living in a surveillance state. you be so- you I don't nothing anymore surprises me because I see it everywhere I go now. The surveillance state is everywhere. I've had government members call me, and they think because they can talk so they have this official tone, they can intimidate and so on. I'm unintimidatable, but you see it behind the scenes. And whenever it happens, I try to make sure I broadcast it so they know I'm out here going to talk about it. And so it kind of they're less aggressive when you they know you're going to do that. But anyway, I just don't think we have the people that's leading this country that are all there, and they certainly are not people that respect the Constitution of the United States. I know that because I see the disrespect they show for it. Even those who are supposed to be interpreting the Constitution, the misinterpretation of it is another sign of their disrespect. And this one thing that I was reading this morning, Donald Trump. They said Donald Trump is one article stated that he's trying to end birthright citizenship. This is Donald Trump. They say is trying to end that. And so the question that they're raising what they're trying to do is act like birthright citizenship is in the Constitution of the United States. And if it is in there, and I'm saying this as a person has my third degree is in this area, I'm gonna tell you something. Let them show it to me. I hear you scholars saying that's found in the document, and you go and cite some court case. That's not the proof of the litmus test. The Supreme Court is interpreting the document that they're supposed to be following as a way of making their rulings, and I want them to show not to me what the Supreme Court has said. Show it to me in the document, and that they cannot do. And I think that's why there's so much hesitation and so much misdirection, and that's both sides of the aisle, both conservatives and liberals. I don't think they want to say on either side of the political divide that those persons that are not citizens of this country could not have a child in this country who, because of his birth, is automatically a citizen of the United States. That the parent of the child, one of the two parents, one at least one, has to be a citizen. But they're saying that that non-citizens can have a child in this country and can pass down it can pass down to their children the citizenship that neither the parents have. And they're saying that is in the Constitution of the United States. And I'm telling you this, show it to me. You can make these claims to layman. I'm not a layman. And it ain't in there. And I don't care how hard you look and how much you can claim from the mountaintop that the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments have anything to do with immigration. And you can import those civil rights amendments into this discussion we're having now about these persons in this country illegally. And then you're making a case that they can have their children's citizenship proclaimed in this country by them being in this country and then birthing a child in the country, and the child becomes a citizen because he's born in the United States. And they can pass what they don't have down to their child. You know what? I'm about ready to just start pimp slapping somebody for saying that. Because that is so vulgar, and there is nothing in the Constitution that allows that. I'm going to read it to you to show you that it's not in there. Now, you can start talking about what the Supreme Court said, and that throws a lot of people off, and they get confused because they think the Supreme Court is interpreting the Constitution, so the Supreme Court says it, they're saying in the name of that document. But if they're saying that in terms of what the document says, why are there so many cases of the Supreme Court having to back down from what it has said in previous rulings? Then later on, the ruling has been altered because that no longer can be sustained because the people have found out that's not in the document. It's made out of whole cloth by the Supreme Court. Look, how many times has that happened? The most famous of which was, in fact, in the Plessy versus Ferguson case. That's the most famous of them, where the court had to, in fact, rescind his verdict That's a verdict it had in 1896. And it had to stand down from it. It stood down from it 58 years later in the Brown versus Board of Education case. Where the court said that what it had decided in 1896, separate but equal, was constitutional because the standard was equality, and so separate could be made constitutional if the standard was one of equality. Then it struck that down by saying that separate is inherently unequal by the mere fact that the separation is ordered by the state. It is inherently unequal because of the separations is in fact ordered by the state, and the state cannot in fact bring equivalency if the places where the separation has occurred is different in any regard. In other words, it's like overlaying when you're watching things with an overhead projector and you put things on top of something, and there's no 100% congruency because it might be a line or some kind of curvature that be different in one part of what's on the projector and another part, so it's not perfectly in sync. And so there's no, so in some place, the equivalency is lost because it's not 100% in terms of what is laid on top of something underneath, and they don't actually have the same. They at some point there's a lack of congruency, and that's what the court was saying about separate but equal. At some point, the separation brings about something that's unequal, the unevenness of it by the very nature of the separation. And now it's ruling 58 years after the Plessy case is now ruling that separate but equal is inherently unconstitutional because it's impossible to make separate equal given just the basic spaces, the difference that would be brought about just in that of itself. So it's inherently unequal. And now they're boo-hooing over that. It was constitutional, now it's not constitutional. And how many times have we seen that happening where the court just simply reverses itself and changes its mind? And it can only do that if the court is not really interpreting the Constitution. There's 9 people on the Supreme Court, just like anywhere else they're doing it. And they're all getting together, 5 say this, 4 that, and 5 carries it. The 5-4 verdict has the weight of the Supreme Court having said it, but 4 of them didn't say it in these 5-4 rulings. And so where does that then stand when almost the same number on one side as it was on the other side, but because we have this idea that majority rule, we have this idea then that's the verdict for the court. The court didn't speak in a universal voice. And the only reason they spoke in a universal voice in the Brown case, if you go back and read the book called Simple Justice, you read that book, you'll see that when Vincent died, Vincent was the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court before Earl Warren. Go read that book, Simple Justice, and read where they realized that in order to rule against the South, which already had risen up in the Civil War, so-called Civil War, they knew that if they made a ruling where there was this kind of a split in the court, the South was ready to resist. You give a 5-4 verdict, and this court comes on down the middle with a ruling, and you're gonna order the South that's already been armed because it's already decided that you don't have the authority to do the things you're doing based upon the Constitution. They disagree with your interpretation of it. You said that secession is not constitutional when secession is constitutional, was then and is now. Secession really is the ultimate safeguard against the tyranny of the federal government. I'm not going to ask you scholars if you agree with that or not. I asked you last week, do you scholars agree with that? I'm going to tell you, you're not qualified to agree or disagree with what I'm saying. I don't ask for your agreement. You're not qualified to disagree. That's all of you. I don't care what school you went to, what college. Your training is not higher than my training. And that's why it's a church to be quiet. I don't have to ask. The church is quiet. And I'm very frightened by these people running this country because I don't see anybody I don't see anybody qualified, quite frankly. Not on the court, not on these courts to make these rulings. James Boasberg, this man is a national embarrassment. You know, the one that is that's how the court sidetracked. They got the country. They did the diversion. They ruled last week, I think it was. They ruled that a judge, a lower level judge, it doesn't have to be a lower level judge, but let's say a judge on the Supreme Court, a single judge can in fact make a ruling that stops the president from being able to carry out a constitutional function. All they did was say that a single judge, a lowly judge like this judge is, cannot do that. And so they're saying these rulings, which you have a case in front of the court, and the judge makes a ruling on that case, and then extrapolates that it has an effect upon that which is not before the court, and the Supreme Court struck that down. You can't stifle a president the way that they're doing by having these low judges making these rulings and stifling the president's ability to act. Well, I think that I know. I say what I think. I know that that's a diversion from the court being reluctant to make a ruling on what's really before the court. And what's before the court is this question of whether or not anyone can come against Trump trying to make birthright citizenship illegal in this country because Trump is standing up for the Constitution that does not allow birthright citizenship. And they're up here saying that Trump, these articles are coming out saying that the court is stopping Donald Trump from changing the Constitution, which recognizes the birthright citizenship. I brought the Constitution of the United States, and I'm going to read from it, and you tell me where does it make this claim. They're talking about the 14th Amendment. And I'm going to ask them to show me where that is in the Constitution of the United States, the 14th Amendment, where there's birthright citizenship found in that part of the Constitution of the United States. And you scholars that are trying to say that, and I always look for what the scholars are saying on this, and you scholars are saying that, you're embarrassing yourself. This is embarrassing. People claim to be constitutional scholars, making idiotic statements like that, and that's an idiotic statement. Now I'm gonna read the 14th Amendment.
Do you ever think how ridiculous our country's degenerated?
Oh,
We
it's
got like I mean we're
frightening.
actually sincerely having debate over gender and but more genders and actually there is sexes and personal pronouns and I mean if anybody said 45 years ago we'd have been engaged in this kind of debate I've been laughing my butt off but I mean and these people take it so damn seriously.
Yes, John, it's frightening that we're having these conversations. That there are they. So how you find more than two genders? How do you actually do that?
Okay, 'cause they say, well, we want to be inclusive. Well, guess what? Everybody, okay, dude, okay, I'm going to say this male and femaleness. We know it's genitally based and hormone based and biologically based. So overall, we'll say that. Okay. But I mean, everybody's interpretation of what it is to be a male or a female, it's like we have to suppose, okay, a female usually tries to define a male, what a man does. What this is what a man does. Well, then, yeah, if we were trying to put that on a female, there'd be a huge amount of hue and cry about against that, right? So I mean, it's just an absurd argument. It's basically individuals will choose for themselves and they'll have their own conceptions of what masculinity or femininity means to them. But I
Hmm.
mean, it shouldn't be open for debate. It can't be open for debate because you can't possibly codify. We got how many millions of people in this country? We're going to supposed to have them designated, all their input actually put on the books. I think it's ridiculous.
What a male cannot do is have a child. A male cannot do. A male cannot get pregnant, and a male cannot have a menstrual cycle. I don't care what you put in the male bathroom.
They're going to go to get those things. I don't want to know where the hell they're putting them for, where they're employing them at.
It's insanity.
And it's just taking all that serious. It's mental illness, folks. If
It
you're
is.
dealing with it, take sure these people are getting treatment.
Yeah.
That's the reason why the liberals are right in some ways. We haven't addressed mental illness, but they're advocating for the mental illness has got to be embraced and
It,
pulled into your life. And it's
yeah,
ridiculous.
it's mental illness and it's been documented. There's a book out by Dr. Lyle Rossiter, and this medical doctor has a book out about it, where he says that uh, he's talking about liberalism being a mental disorder, and he's right about that. It is a mental disorder. The psychological he ties it the psychological causes of use the word causes. There's not you can't say causes. You have to say liberalism is the cause. That is a cause of it. And if you just listen to what they're saying, those that are on the left, if you just listen to them, I'm talking about listen to. I can let me name some names here. You listen to Jasmine Crockett, or you listen to Alexandria Ocasio Cortez, or Hakeem Jeffries, or you can listen to Nancy Pelosi, Ilhan Omar, Presley in Massachusetts. Look at the one that ran, didn't add anything to the ticket, but ran as the vice president under Kamala Harris, the governor of Minnesota.
Tim Waltz.
Tim Walz,
Yeah.
this man is absolutely insane. You're not acting normal when you are doing what Pelosi did. The president of the United States has been elected by a majority of the voters who voted in the election. And the man is making a speech for a joint session of Congress. And at the end of the speech, you're in front of the whole world watching the speech that are concerned about what this man says because he's the most powerful political individual on the planet because of the resources he can command. And before the entire world listening in on what this man has to say, you then, at the end of the man's speech, in front of the whole world on camera, take his speech and tear it up. And that's not a big issue. Nobody calls for this woman to stand down from her job, cannot be the Speaker of the House. You did that in front of the entire, that woman is sitting up there behind the President of the United States. And what you do when the president's speaking is that if you don't agree with the president, you don't frown, you don't respond to it, you just sit there. If you don't applaud, just sit there, and the president is in fact speaking. You have to respect, you don't have to respect the office holder, you have to respect the office. That's what you're not asserting support, political support for Donald Trump. You're pledging your support to the Constitution of the United States that gives the president the right to be the commander in chief under the second article of the Constitution of the United States. And he represents that whether you like him or not. That's assigned to him by the Constitution. If you have respect for the Constitution, you would not be doing that and tearing up a speech made by a man who is made the president by the American people by there being more electoral votes on this side of the presidential question than it is on the other side, and he becomes president because it's mandated in Article 2 of the Constitution of the United States that the Electoral College will elect the president of the United States. That's mandated by the Constitution. And that is not going to be altered because you have to change that with a constitutional amendment, and they think they're going to be able to get that. They're not going to ever get that. You're never going to get 3/4 of states to do what they want to do, and what they want to do is make it a matter of the majority vote. They want to make it a matter of democracy, quote unquote. More votes on this side than on that side. Let's have the people vote and make a majority of vote to decide the issue one way or the other. It's never going to happen. No, that was not even intended by the framers who were afraid of majority rule. Actually, absolutely frightened by it. Both Madison, first of all, by Hamilton, who raised it in, don't tell me, who first raised it in Federalist Paper 9, and then picked up to carry it down the line further by Madison, came behind Hamilton, and furthered the conversation in the greatest of the Federalist Papers. I think there were two that stand out among the 85, and I think 10 stands out. 9 stands out too, but not 10 really stands out. And 51 stands out. I think those are the two greatest of the 85 Federalist Papers. But if you read 10, you get some idea of how silly these politicians are talking about our democracy and et cetera, et cetera. When you read 10, you can see the framers' demands of the framers churning, Hamilton and Madison. You can see the minds churning, trying to find a way to prohibit majorities from taking over and having majoritarian tyranny without squashing the right for majorities to exist. And what they did in the Constitution and what they did in the 10th, what they did in discussion about it in 9 and 10 is they found a way to get around squashing majorities. And what they did with it, what you see in the you scholars listen to this very carefully. What you see in the dealing with majority factions, they were dealing with factions in 9 and 10 of the Federalist Papers. And the way you dealt with it without squashing the rights for majority factions to exist is that you made a matter of having majority factions to check on majority on majority factions by creating multiple majorities. That's what the electoral college is. That's the brilliance of the electoral college. And if they understand how embarrassing it is for them to be so ignorant to be talking about abolishing the electoral college and going to a majority vote, you have got to be out of your mind. You got to be out of your mind. Only a liberal man will assert that. Now, the conservatives may not understand why it's important to retain that, but they're not going to advocate getting rid of it as the liberals are advocating. They don't understand it. Maybe the conservatives don't understand it either, but would advocate abolishing it. They're trying to abolish the electoral college. You can't be a sane person and do that because majority rule is dangerous. And those discussions about it by the framers in that room they were in Philadelphia, that same room they were in, that drafted that drew up the Declaration of Independence, and when they drafted the Constitution of the United States, later to be ratified by 9 of the 13 states. Because the Constitution has to be proposed, amendments have to be proposed. You can do it a different way, but the way it's been done is 2/3 of the members of the House and 2/3 of the members of the Senate will propose the bill, will propose the amendment to be added to the Constitution. They can propose it. They cannot, of their own volition, add it to the document because the states have to be involved in that. And today it would take 38 states, 3/4 of the states. See, 50. If it just took a majority, it'd be 51 states. This idea of majority rule that people keep talking about is so profane in understanding of our Constitution, drafted by the framers of the United States who thought this thing through. And these Johnny come lately that came behind them trying to outthink the framers. And you talking about what, Nancy Pelosi doing that? You talking about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Kareem, this guy from New York. These lightweights. There's not a thought. You can't detect the thought that comes out that's behind anything that people like Jasmine Crockett is talking about. And they're talking about this woman running for president of the United States. You can't be serious and be saying things like that because that woman does not know anything. You listen to her sometime closely. Donald Trump said that she's, what was the words he used? He was talking about her being a lightweight. It's worse than that. This woman reminds me of Edith Bunker on on that program they had where Edith was the dimwit.
All in the family.
All in the Family, that program there. That she just was. She was a smart woman in real life, much smarter than Crockett. But on the program, you had this a comedy, so she was playing this dimwit, but she was a smart woman in real life. That's more than I can say for those persons that we have in this Congress. All of the ones on that aisle, they're frightening. These people frighten me. These people are frightening. Not that they are frightening like Frankenstein frightening. They're frightening to have power in their hand, and that their voice carries weight because of the positions that they hold. They don't have those positions because they know anything. And I'm trying to think of that word that Donald Trump used when he's describing Jasmine Crockett. This woman doesn't know anything. And they're now talking about trying to identify who could run in the next election in 2028, who's going to run for president. And they're actually saying this woman may well be the standard bearer for the Democratic Party. You can't be. This country cannot be serious, and that happens. And they got a person right now that's running for the mayor who might really be a candidate for deportation from this country because of what this man is involved in. The requirements for the being a member of the House, being a representative in the mayor position, or even being a member of the House. Those are you. I'm wondering. I wonder if people understand that if you are illegally in this country and you're holding an elective office, such as Ilhan Omar, is she a citizen of this country? She's in the House of Representatives. But look at the requirement. Look at the requirement for being a member of the House of Representatives. And let's talk about whether or not some of these persons that are serving in these elected bodies have the requirements to be serving in those bodies. Can Ilhan Omar be deported? This is some very frightening stuff that's happening in this country because we have lost our way. Because I'm convinced after having looked at this case of birthright citizenship, I am absolutely convinced now that this country is run by idiots. I want to see what this court is going to eventually say. They're trying to stall and saying it. They're going to make this a matter of Trump. Trump is saying that there's no birthright citizenship. They're going to make it about Trump. I don't want to make it about Trump. I want to make it about this document right here. Because they're saying that birthright citizenship is granted in the Constitution of the United States. Let me read it to you. Let me read this to you. And you tell me, does this give you birthright citizenship? This is Amendment 14. Now, why is 14 added in the Constitution in the aftermath of the War of Secession? That's what I'm going to call it. The War of Southern Secession, called the Civil War. Why is this added at that time in the Constitution of the United States, ratified July the 9th, 1868? And Section 1 says this: all persons born or naturalized in the United States and is a, and Mrs. Reed was right, and Mrs. Reed was right 100% of the time in her class, because that woman knew her English. She knew her grammar. And she taught that and is a conjunction, connecting one part of a sentence to another part of the sentence. The word but does the same thing. So all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States. What it doesn't say is this: all persons born or naturalized in the United States are citizens of the United States. It does not say that. It says, and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. So here's the question. You scholars will agree with me on this, or you're certainly not going to say anything publicly to disagree. Those that are not citizens of the United States, are they subject to the jurisdiction of the United States? The parents who are not citizens, are they subject to the jurisdiction of the United States? The answer is no. They're subject to the laws of the United States. The jurisdiction is where their citizenship is located. And when I travel outside the country, I'm very much aware and cognizant of the fact that I'm under the laws of the countries that I enter into with my visa. But the visa authorized me to be in that country by the country that has jurisdiction over my travel. And when I got that visa, I got it from the country where my jurisdiction is, and I got it by submitting my passport to the American government where I'm a citizen of. I didn't go and submit it to another country. Did it in my country, because that's what my jurisdiction is, in my country. I sent my passport to Washington to have the visa stamped. They give me the right to travel by the country where my jurisdiction is. My country gave me the right to leave the country and go elsewhere. And the visa that I got by submitting that to the country based upon the passport, I got the passport from the country where my jurisdiction is. I don't have a passport from Canada. I don't have a passport from Mexico. I got a passport from the United States of America, because because that's where my jurisdiction lies. When I go into another country, I'm under the laws of that country. If I violate those laws, there's nothing that this country can do. If I'm over there doing something I should not be doing in that country, this country cannot reach into that country and tell them how to respond to that, because this country does not have uh, jurisdiction in that country, and I don't have the right to tell that country how it's going to respond to any violation I'm involved in, because that country has jurisdiction inside, because it's jurisdiction there, because there's sovereignty there. You find that out very quickly when you go into these countries and you find out that your country cannot tell that country how it's supposed to respond to what you're doing. That girl that played basketball found that out when she went to Russia, thinks she gonna tote some marijuana in there. There's one name, I think her name is Branner, I think her name is. Yes, they threw her in jail, and they did some deal making and so on and so forth. They could reach in there and tell them in Russia, let her out because she's a citizen of the United States. They had jurisdiction there. You didn't have jurisdiction there. Your jurisdiction is where your citizenship is, and we have to understand there's a difference between being under the laws of the country and being under the jurisdiction of the country. There's two different and separate things. I'm under the jurisdiction of the United States of America. If I get in trouble outside the country, I got to go to my embassy. That's what I did when I was in Senegal one time. I was stranded in Senegal. I forget the year now because it's been so many years ago, but I was stranded in Senegal because I had gone into another country and I only had one entry in that country, and they were not going to allow me to go back in there when they had a single entry into that country. I couldn't go back to Nigeria, where I was going to exit off the continent from Nigeria and come back to the United States. But they would not let me get on the plane to go to Nigeria, where I could exit off the continent from the place where I had an entry into Nigeria. I had asked them to stamp it twice. I didn't check before I left to see if they'd done that. But I found out when I get to Senegal that, and trying to get back on that plane and go back to Nigeria, they blocked me from doing so. So I had to now go to my embassy where my jurisdiction was, to my embassy, and ask for them to help me to get over this hurdle that I had to deal with, and I had to. I knew I was going to find a way to do it, but it's amazing what went on in that embassy, because they were telling me that in order for them to fix this problem for me, it would require me to give them my passport, because you're making problems for the country outside the country, and you create problems that you can't resolve yourself based upon the fact that they gave you, through their jurisdiction, the right to do what you're doing, to travel, to be in that country with a visa, and you have created problems. And what they want to do now to rectify this problem is make sure you don't put them behind that eight ball again, and they want to confiscate your passport. They will, as you, since you're a citizen, they will in fact accommodate to fix that problem because you're a citizen of the United States. But they're going to require you to hand your passport in, because they got jurisdiction of that passport. The place where I was, Senegal couldn't take that passport from me. That passport was a passport that was in fact issued by the United States, because they had, that's what my jurisdiction was. But the laws of Senegal was something different. the law and the jurisdiction are two different things. And the Constitution says all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof, not subject to the laws thereof, to the jurisdiction thereof. And they're trying to act like there's birthright citizenship because it says all persons born and naturalized in the United States, to leave the rest of that out, the end part left out, and they jump over that to citizens of the United States. That's not what this language says. It says all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States. There's no birthright citizenship anywhere found in that language. And I don't care whether you scholars agree with that or not. That's what the Constitution says. It does not say what you're saying it says, because you left out and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. You leave that part out and you act as if there's a period after it says all, after moving out the and part, you act like it says this: all persons born naturalized in the United States are citizens of the United States. And that's not what this language says. It says, and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. You cannot leave that out and understand what is being required here for you to be a citizen of the United States of America. And it has nothing to do with birthright citizenship. And you cannot pass birthright citizenship unless you are a citizen yourself. And that's where the problem is in terms of what these scholars are saying. They're not trying to cancel Donald Trump out. They're trying to cancel the Constitution out. Because there's no birthright citizenship in the Constitution of the United States. It's not found there. I'm saying it, if the court does not say it, if the court has a ruling, I don't care what the numbers are, 5, 4, 7, 2, whatever the numbers are. If a majority of members of the court will rule that there's a right to birthright citizenship, then we have a real problem. Houston, it is not just going out here with this moon landing stuff. We got a real problem with our hand because we have people that's running this country that are idiots, sitting in places of power and nullifying the law of the land by making these rulings. They have no constitutional weight, saying the president of the United States is trying to change birthright citizenship. The Constitution does not allow it. And Donald Trump is trying to uphold that, and they're saying that what Trump is doing is unconstitutional. No, what they're doing is unconstitutional, and that's verified by the amendment they're trying to say says what it does not say. It says what I see it says. You must have the birth in the Constitution in the country, and the country must also have that person born and have the jurisdiction of that person born in the United States. It must be both. If it's just one and not the other, then there's no claim to citizenship of birth upon that one part. It's both parts, it's both and. And next week when I come, I want to talk about something that everybody's missed in terms of this idea of the president not being able to act upon committing troops around the world because the Constitution says that the Congress shall have the power to declare war in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11. I'm going to clean that up next week as well. And there'll be no scholar that will come behind that and say other than what I would say here. And none of them are saying what I'm saying here because they're not on this level. That's a fact. But I'm going to clean that up next week as well. Okay, I got to get out of here. Until next week, I want you to follow your dream. If you don't follow your dream, you'll never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.